Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. I would like to introduce our presenter today, Chris Paintrod. Chris has been with Bloomerang for 7 years. When I first started at Bloomerang, Chris was already there, and I considered him one of the sources of knowledge when I first started at Bloomerang. I loved coming to him with questions and sitting with him and shadowing him. So I'm very happy to have him with us. He also has over 20 years of experience working in the nonprofit world before coming to Bloomerang. He is an avid donor, volunteer leader, and activist at 3 indie area nonprofits. So I'm so happy to have him here today. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Hi, Diana. Hi, everybody. I keep looking for any customers out there that might be my personal customers that I might have sold Bloomerang to. I didn't recognize them as the chat was flying by, but if you are one of them and you recognize me, please reach out and say hi. So I should go ahead and share my screen now, Diana, right? I'm the oldest surviving salesperson here at Bloomerang. So I've all of the knowledge and wisdom I've accumulated is strictly from Hard Knocks. But I'm grateful to be here with you today, and we're going to talk about using Bloomerang to manage your planned giving program. So I appreciate everybody who chimed in on the poll. That the results, I guess, were not surprising. We've got a lot of folks who are just thinking about this for the first time, and some that are sort of tinkering around in the early stages. So let's see. Okay, let's get to it. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We'll talk about the basics of planned giving. Now, I'm not a planned giving expert as such. I'm a salesperson who has worked with a lot of fundraisers on a lot of problems for the last actually more than 7 years. I've been in this kind of business for close to 20 years. So what I'm going to talk about today is how to use Bloomerang to execute your planned giving plan. So we'll talk about the basics a little bit to start, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. And it doesn't matter whether you've never heard of planned giving before or you're semi-expert. I think everybody will find a lot of value in how we're going to apply Bloomerang to your strategy. So then we're going to talk about the meat of the presentation is going to be divided into 2 parts. The first part will be identifying prospects who would be a good candidate for a planned gift. And then once we've done that, we're going to talk about setting up your plan of action so you can have a methodical approach to managing your planned gift, your structured strategy. So as Diana said, chat in your questions as we go. I'm going to try to take a couple of short breaks and answer any urgent questions, and we'll also save time at the end, as she told you. So fire away. So first of all, let's agree on what planned giving is. So it's usually, but it's not always, going to be a cash gift left from a donor's will or estate. So the others will be exceptions to the rule, but I don't want you to have the impression that a cash gift from an estate is the only kind of planned gift you can get. You'll see there are several other financial events in a donor's lifetime that might also trigger that. So you won't see a lot of these alternatives, but don't get so locked into the will and estate gift that you don't think there are any other ways to acquire planned gifts. And they are also usually, but not always, in cash from a disbursement from an estate. But a planned gift can take a lot of different forms, and you'll see several of them listed here. And I've heard a lot of artwork examples, sometimes either classic cars, sometimes work vehicles that come in handy. So there are, again, you'll probably see mostly cash disbursements, but don't rule out any of the others, and don't be afraid to be a little bit creative in how you approach your planned giving tactics. Of course, with a planned gift, most of them will come in at an unpredictable time, but the planned giving is so important because it could be a great key to the sustainability of your organization. You're probably thinking, well, if I start a planned giving program now, the first gift I'll probably get may be, several or many years away, and that's true. But you may also be thinking, gee, I wish that somebody had done this 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and we'd already be reaping some of the benefits of that. So if you're looking at the long view of your organization, this is definitely a key to sustainability. A common misconception about plan givers is that the only time to ask them is when they're old. In fact, I think the conversation becomes more and more awkward the closer your prospect is to his or her final days. So I would ask earlier, and there are several life events that happen in a donor's lifetime that make it an ideal opportunity to talk about a planned gift in their estate. So one of the most common reasons that a donor might call up his or her attorney to update their will or estate is when they're in their 40s and 50s. Their kids are leaving the house, they're looking ahead towards their retirement, and they're making some kind of resetting their financial plans. That's a great time to be a part of that conversation. But the number one reason why a donor would call their attorney to create a will for the first time is upon the birth of their first child. So now you may not be talking to a lot of donors who are in their 20s and 30s, but if you've got relationships with them and you see that first opportunity come over the horizon, that is also a good time to plant the seed and see if you can be included in that donor's estate plans, even though that gift may not come to fruition for decades. But again, some of us are wishing that somebody had decades ago had that planned gift program started. So is planned giving even worth it? It sounds awkward and kind of unpredictable, but according to our sources at Giving USA, the average estate gift nationally last year was about $37,000. That is about 7 times what most of my customers would tell me they think of as an average gift or a major gift. So at $37,000 a pop, that's the highest return on investment you could hope for in your fundraising activities. And there, as you see here, we'll talk about how we approach these, and they're not as hard to ask for as you may think. And if you develop a pipeline of these now that might begin to come to fruition 10 years from now, and you get a couple or three, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 gifts a year going forward, how much of an impact would that make to your ability to serve your organization's mission? There are a lot of great benefits to plan giving for both you and your donor. First of all, as I said earlier, the average plan gift comes in at around $37,000. If you see this second bullet here, the average charitable gift is almost 3 times the size of the donor's previous lifetime giving total. So a donor who gave you $5,000 in his or her lifetime could easily come in with a $15,000 or $25,000 or $35,000 plan gift at the end of their life. And it also, one of the cool things about plan giving is you can take an average Joe kind of a donor and make them into a major donor, because a lot of donors would like to give more but don't have the wherewithal during their lifetime while they're raising kids and saving for retirement. But it's not uncommon at all to have a 5 or 6 figure dollar disbursement in their estate plans for you. So it's a really cool thing to do to take an average donor and make them feel like a major donor to your organization. The the research tells us that about 43% have no real fundraising strategy at all related to planned gifts. So that sort of parallels what I think what Diana's poll was saying. So, but this is going to be the interest that we're seeing in planned giving is going way up, and this is going to be a great way for you to really turbocharge your fundraising strategy in the big picture. So let's look at who these donors are. And these are and we'll show you in Bloomerang how we keep track of some of these things. Again, the resounding theme for our plan givers is that they don't need to be wealthy. In fact, a relatively average income earner is more likely to be a plan giver than a wealthy donor. The key to plan giving is not to concentrate on wealth, but on donor engagement and loyalty. So, and particularly, we're going to look at my favorite characteristic that suggests plan gift eligibility is the number of consecutive years or the length of time they've been giving to you. Other key suggesters of plan gift eligibility include constituents who have logged a lot of volunteer hours with you. Maybe they haven't given you huge donations, but they put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into your organization. If the organization is meaningful to that donor or that volunteer, then they might become a good candidate for leaving a mention of you in their estate plan. And also anybody who is impacted by your organization. So grateful patients, family members of patients, alumni, parents of alumni, that will vary a lot from organization to organization, but think about what kinds of people have been impacted by your organization one way or the other that might give them the inclination to want to make a mention of you in their estate plan. And again, to reemphasize, your typical everyday donor can become a legacy donor. The retired postal worker who has come in and helped you to stuff envelopes once a week for the last 5 years might be that huge, relatively huge plan gift, assuming if they own their home free and clear and don't have a lot of heirs to distribute their estate, that could easily be a six-figure donation from somebody who was of relatively modest means. Okay, so, but to do any of this, I'm throwing out a lot of ideas that I hope you find interesting, but you really have to coalesce a plan in to make any of it work in any kind of a dependable way. So as I said, I'm not a plan gift consultant, but Bloomerang has a lot of friends who are plan giving consultants. You'll find the directory on our website, and I think Diana will point that out to you in a few minutes here as we go through the program. So if you're not yourself an expert on plan giving, I strongly suggest that you find a good advisor who can help you to put this plan together. So here you're looking at my Bloomerang dashboard, and we're going to start with we're going to first look at custom fields. We're going to modify some custom fields or create some custom fields of two different sorts. To help us with our prospect identification, we're going to create some custom fields on the constituent screen on the profile to give us some flags and tags that we can use to help us identify our people. And then we're going to switch over to the notes, and we're going to create some custom note fields to help us to track the process. And in between times, we'll interject reporting and talk about some specific suggested reports you might use to help you to use the information that you've accumulated. So I'm going to start with my custom fields. And so I'm going to go to my settings menu, And I'm going to go to custom fields and constituent. Now, I've already built these fields, so I'm just going to show you what I've created. But if you know your way around the settings at all, this should look fairly familiar to you. These are all of the custom fields I have on my database. You see I have a lot of inactive ones that we're not going to worry about today. But one of my custom fields is what I call plan gift engagement tags or triggers. These are attributes that I'm going to flag on a constituent record to tell me one of the ways they might be eligible, if you will, for a plan gift. So this is a multi-select text field. And in that field, I have created half a dozen triggers or tags that would tell me if a constituent would have that any of these things on the donor's record would suggest they might have an interest in an estate gift. So yours will vary quite a bit from as different types of organizations do. My setup here is mainly designed to look at an educational institution like a high school or a college, perhaps. So the kind of values that I have as triggers include alumni, parents and grandparents of alumni. Everybody should have past board members on their plan gift trigger. Anybody who is a past board member or other significant volunteer with the organization, I think is an eligible plan gift prospect. So many of you may not have season ticket holders, but my small college example here does. And one thing one attribute everybody ought to have on their list of attributes or triggers is somebody who's already said yes to a plan gift or expressed interest in plan giving. Sometimes they come out and tell you. They may have checked a box on a web form. They may have picked up a brochure. But some folks in the most casual of conversations will say, yeah, I would consider that. So if they have expressed interest, then you should flag their record as such. So you could have as many of these tags as you want. I'm limiting this to about a half a dozen examples. And that is you and your plan gift advisor may have more ideas than just that. But for my example, that's really all I've got in the way of engagement tags and triggers. So I'm going to show you how those would show up on a constituent record. So I'm going to use Kirsten Marie here as my example. And if I look at her profile, I'll hit my edit button on the profile to open up all the fields so you can see all the values. I'll scroll past her addresses and salutations and such. And you'll see I have my general attributes field and I have my plan gift engagement tags and triggers. And I have her, Kirsten is flagged as an alumnus of my organization. So that is one of my triggers. So I'll be able to search and filter on this so I can look for constituents who are alumni who I want to put on my plan gift list. So that is really the essence of the custom fields on the constituent screen in terms of helping me to identify who these people are. So I'm going to combine that with some giving history and other historical data to create either a really big and broad target list, or depending on the size of your organization, you might be trying to pare it down and get a little more focused. So let me go to reports next. And I'm going to show off what I think might be the starting point for all your reports in terms of identifying plan gift interest. I'm going to go to new and use a template. So I'll start from a template. And coincidentally, the very first template that I see on this template page is loyal donors. This is the perfect starting place for creating your plan gift prospect list. I'm going to click on that. And for those of you that haven't used this template before, it does two things. One, the first filter, that default filter, is individuals, just to make sure we don't get any stray organizational contacts in here. And then each of these other 5 filters is says that they have giving history in a certain date range. So in this case, this is the year 2019. You'll see the filter has transactions between January and December of 2019. And it also requires that they have giving history in the previous year, 2018, and so forth. So there are 5 date range filters here, each one specifying the most recent consecutive year. So everybody on this list has given to my hypothetical organization every year for at least 5 consecutive years. Now, depending on whether you want to make the list broader or smaller, you could add another. If you wanted to go 6 years, you could add another. I'm going to add another date range. And I'm going to plug in, I forget where I left off. I think 2015 was the last one. So I'm going to say between January and adding one more date range. So now I have 6 consecutive, everybody on this list, 41 households. They're all individual constituents, and they have at least 6 consecutive years of giving history. So that's a great place to start. So I have my most loyal donors already on my screen. I'm going to use this same report and elaborate on it to create a super robust report of prospects. But what I'm going to do here in your world could represent several different reports that you might create. I'm going to do it all in one fell swoop here. So I have 41 households in my demo database that have given for 6 consecutive years. Another criteria that I might want to apply, maybe I have donors who have given me a lot of gifts, but maybe not, they didn't hit every consecutive year. So I don't want to rule out somebody who's given me a lot of, maybe somebody who's given me 20 donations who maybe didn't hit each one of those calendar years. So I'm going to add an OR filter, and I'm going to add a has transactions filter. And in my green dropdown, I'm going to say has at least, and then I'm going to specify the minimum number of transactions I want to get them on this list. And I'm going to say 20. So now I'm up to 94 households in my list. So now I have my 6-year consecutive givers and anybody else who's given me at least 20 donations. So my list grew a little bit because I added another possibility. Okay. I'm also, we talked about volunteers earlier. So I want to add anybody who's been a loyal volunteer. So I'm going to add this as an OR. And volunteer hours in my demo database are tracked as interactions. And if you want to know more about volunteer hours and how we track that in Bloomerang, there is at least one academy class and plenty of help documents in the knowledge base to help you to do that. So I'm going to add interactions, and I have it set up to look for a certain minimum number of volunteer hours. So I'm going to look in my interaction filters, and I have this is also a custom field. I have a custom field for volunteer hours, and I can state a range of number of hours. So I'm going to say, I don't have a lot of volunteer hours in my demo database, so I'm going to say just 10. I'll set the bar pretty low for that. I think I changed from 94 to 95. So I bumped that list up a little bit. And then I want to add those, my triggers and attributes. So the field that I created was called Planned Gift Engagement Tags or Triggers. You'll remember that from the Constituent screen. And I'm going to add all of them. I want anybody who has any of these characteristics. And now my list just bounced way up from about 90 something to 236. So with each of these different types of criteria, I expanded my list. Now, depending upon the size of your organization and how specific or broad you want to be, you might be considering these filters as or instead of and, because if I add them as or, that means they could meet any of these criteria. So if I'm a small organization looking for as broad of a base of prospects as possible, I might use this or combination. If I'm a larger organization where I have many thousands, maybe tens of thousands of donors and constituents to consider, I might need to zero in and create some priorities so that I have a manageable sized list to work with. So I might combine some of these as ands. Every time I add an and, it would shrink the list rather than growing the list as it did with an or. I hope that made sense. If you understand the ands and ors, that hopefully made good sense to you, but we can review that as we go. So now I have 236 prospects who made the cut on for one or more of all those attributes that I plugged into this very broad list. So I think on here, I'm going to do I'll just pick somebody from the top here. So, Serena, she's too wealthy. Let's pick somebody more average than her. Maybe Mallory here. We're going to go into Mallory's record. And I see her giving history isn't, okay, well, she's obviously on my consecutive years giving list because I have a $500 donation each of the last 5 years and a big $26,000 a year back in 2015. What I'm going to do with her, well, excuse me, I'm going to back up a second. Sorry, I got myself off track. Let me just stop right there. And Diana, tell me if we have any questions so far. I meant to simply recap the custom fields and then generating the prospect lists from the custom fields and the giving history. Is anything jumping out at you that we need to address?
Thanks, Chris. We do have a question. What are your thoughts about people who've paid for membership dues but have not made an actual donation outside of that? Would you consider them among your prospects?
That's a great question. And it's a very subjective question. And that depends on how you view your members. Is a member a highly engaged person with the organization, or is a member somebody who's sort of a consumer of your services? An easy example would be we have a fabulous children's museum here in Indianapolis, and they have tens of thousands of members. Most of them are members while their children are young enough to learn and enjoy the museum, and then they drop their membership when the kids are off to high school. So others have other memberships represent more of a supportive role rather than a consumer role. So if you think you and your plan giving advisor think that a member would be a good candidate and you want to expand your list of prospects, then I think they're perfectly legitimate. Every one of these suggestions that I gave you is a judgment call, and you can be as aggressive and strict or as broad and loose as you want, depending upon how big of a pool you're going to get. But if your members are consumers of your service, then I would say they're likelihood might be a little bit less than if you were, say, a supporting member of a public broadcasting, where you were a member for multiple years and the only thing you got in return was a coffee mug or a box set of CDs or something. So the intent of the membership, I think, would play a critical role in determining how likely they would be to be a planned gift prospect. That was a long answer. Hope it made sense.
That makes perfect sense. I myself am a member of an organization that's volunteer driven. So we don't actually ask for we don't get a lot of donations per se. What we do get a lot more of is donations of time. So we'll get members who will have donated 10,000 hours, but have never donated anything apart from those hours and the yearly membership due. But I would say for us, for the type of organization those are great candidates for planned giving.
Mm-hmm. Volunteer service might be the sincerest form of giving, because even for people of relatively small means, it's sometimes easier to write a check for $50 than take a day or a Saturday or spend 2 evenings a week doing the dirty work, as it were, of helping to run the organization. So I think volunteers are always good candidates. I wouldn't say your corporate workday volunteers are great, but those who volunteer on their own with whom you have an individual relationship, I think, are always good candidates.
That's a great point too. So look at those triggers in tandem with other indicators.
Exactly.
Chris, how could you make sure that your top donors who give through, let's say, a giving foundation show up on the reports as well?
Oh, great. So we're talking about what is really a third-party donation. There's a donor behind the gift, but the check actually comes from a donor advised fund or from a family foundation or a community foundation. Let's see, that's a little bit of a curveball. So I think actually this report would include those, because Diana, tell me, are soft credits a transaction type?
Correct.
Okay.
So if they have a soft credit, if you soft credit them on the gift, we're not making any distinction here as to what type of gift they're giving. So if they have a soft credit on their timeline and you're filtering for any type of transaction, if they have soft credits, this report will pick them up.
Excellent. And the technically correct way to handle a gift from a third party, like a donor advised fund, is to credit the donation to the donor advised fund or to the community foundation, and soft credit the donor who authorized the donation. And this particular report is not specific. This says any transaction during any of these date ranges. So if you are soft crediting your donors, they would show up in a report like this. And you can also tweak your transaction filters to make it more specific if you want to narrow it down to certain. Maybe
actually, Chris, sorry, can you click on type is?
Type? Yes.
So transaction filters include date and then type.
Down here?
Yes, just to the right of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, yeah. Right.
So this report template does not include soft credits. So if you did want to include them, you would just add soft credits to this one.
Excellent. So I may have just broadened my list a little bit. I had 236. Nope, didn't change it. But that's a great point. So I almost misled you. The default transaction types are limited to just those cash transactions. So if you want to add soft credits, you'll need to add that to each of these filters, each of these date range filters in the template.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much for all of your questions.
Good catch on that, Diana. Thanks. Thanks for keeping me in line. Okay, so now we've identified our prospects. And again, we could make this a really broad list by adding more criteria to allow them to qualify, or we can make it smaller by combining the criteria or specifying just certain criteria if we want to narrow our list to a more targeted one. So the next phase is going to be to create our execution plan. And to do that, we're going to go back to custom fields, but this time we're going to work with notes. And that may sound a little odd to start with, but I think it'll make sense as we go. So I'm going back to my settings menu and going to notes. And I've created some custom fields on notes that are specific to plan, gift, and prospect management. And you'll see I have over a dozen fields here, and I've probably overcomplicated it. What I've done is allow for any possible thing you might want to track that I could imagine. Your list may be half this long or less, but I threw a lot of things out here just as examples of things that you could be tracking. So we're on the notes screen, and the first thing that I think everybody ought to have is something like ask status. This tells me if they're on my list, where am I with this particular prospect? So my lowest level of progress is identified. That means I put them on the list, but I haven't done anything with them yet. I have a status called in progress, which means I've initiated the conversation with them somehow. And then, of course, I have these two are my resolutions, accepted or declined. You may have more steps or more phases that you might want to track, but these are some good starters, I think. If you're a larger organization and you have multiple fundraisers who might be out in the field doing this, you might have a field for their prospect manager / asker. So I have 4 people who might be assigned to a specific prospect, and each of these askers might have their own portfolio of prospects. So if I want to assign an asker to a prospect, I can use a field like that. I also have a field, and this might be overkill. I have a readiness or a confidence field, which basically is a 1 to 10 scale on how close I think I am to making the ask and resolving it, hopefully with a yes. So I can upgrade them along this scale as we go. That may or may not be a necessary thing you want to look at, but I throw it out there for your consideration. I have a field for how much we're going to ask for. Sometimes we never know that, so that may not be critical in many of your cases. I also have one called a gift type. If I know what to expect, if it's going to be cash or something else, and I want to keep track of them and categorize them, I can do that. If I want to project a date that I want to use to close the deal, as it were, I can put a deadline on it here. If I actually get a commitment of specific dollars, I have a currency field here where I can enter the actual pledged or promised amount. Previous steps taken, next steps taken, things like that. Again, most of these are thrown out just for your consideration. These are all things that I've included in my status report, though, so you'll see all these custom fields show up when we actually get to the reporting piece, which is next. So I've created a report called Plan Gift Status. And it is a report based on notes. So that's the data type that I looked for. Actually, so to be sure, if I do it from scratch, I'm going to click on New Report, build a report from scratch, and Notes. So then I begin adding my filters and my custom fields to create my planned gift status report. So having created a report based on notes, I have just a couple of filters, and I'm using that status field that we saw a moment ago as the primary criteria for getting on the list. I want anybody who has any of my 4 statuses. If they don't have a status yet, that means they're not on my list. If I've considered them and I want to add them to the list, I simply add a note and start with identified. And then as an insurance policy, just to make sure I don't get any wayward constituents on my report, I've specified that they're going to be individuals, because that's we're limiting our plan gift asking to individuals. So that's my filter, and yours doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. The report itself, I've added some columns, and I started with my status column. You remember we had identified, in progress, and accepted or declined as my 4 statuses. And I've grouped it on that field. So I've added the group feature so that now I have them all grouped according to where they are in the process. And I can of course group it on any of these fields depending upon what I'm trying to do. I could group it by ask amount or by gift officer is another common way you might want to group it if you're tracking that. But I see I have 2 constituents on my list who I've identified. And I have 9 that are in progress and so forth. Then, of course, I've added the constituent name field, so I know who I'm talking about. And then here are most of the other fields that we saw in our custom fields. I've added to the report. So I've added the gift officer or the asker. I've added the note from the note field, which sounds kind of funny, but that would have any text that I wanted to enter to remind myself of what's happening. Here's the ask amount field that you saw, and all the others. I have the actual last action and my readiness for ask. So you could have any combinations of your custom fields on there. And let's go ahead and add somebody to this list. I'm going to go back. And I'm going to go back to Kirsten here. And so I saw that she was on my big report because, if you remember, she is an alumnus of my institution. And I haven't done anything about her yet, but I want to add her to the list because I saw her on that report. So to get her started in my process, I'm going to add a new note to her timeline. And I'll just say, okay. Just a little note to myself. This is the note that would appear in that report that I just showed you. And then I'll go down into my custom fields. So what's her ask status? Well, I haven't done anything yet, so I've just identified her. If I'm going to assign her to somebody's portfolio, if I have my multiple askers, we'll put Chris on the case. And if I'm keeping track of my readiness or confidence, I'm going to put her as a 1 because we haven't done anything. And then I have all these other fields that I may be able to update as we go forward with the process. So I'll save this note to her timeline. And you'll see there's that note with the note on the note. So let's go back to my report now. So I had this open in another tab. And I'm going to just refresh the report. And now you'll see Kirsten now shows up. Since I tagged her as identified, now she shows up on my identified shortlist. I'm also going to put a task on her timeline to remind myself that I'm supposed to follow up with her, and I want to have a coffee meeting with her to explore the possibilities. So, and I'll put that on tomorrow's to-do list. Of course, the purpose is going to be, we'll call it a solicitation. I'm not quite that far yet. And I'm going to call her on the phone, and I'll save that. So now on her timeline, I have the note and I have my task to call her. Okay, so I call her on the phone, I get that meeting, and so we're already at step 2. So after I do that, I'm going to complete the task, indicate what happened. Whatever happened there. That goes on her timeline. But back in the report, I'm going to make an update to her record on this report. So I love to click through these. I like to open a record from a report in a new tab by right-clicking on it. And I'm going to leave everything alone at the top, but now I'm going to update her status because now we're in progress. Since she gave me a favorable response, I'm going to upgrade her readiness to maybe a 3 or a 4. If I know what we're talking about, I can add a GIF there. I can update the type if I want to. If I want to set a date to ask her by New Year's Eve after she's maybe had a couple, I can do that. I'll keep referring back to this same note, though, from the report to update the note as we get further down the path. And then if I go back to my original report and I refresh it, we'll see that Kirsten now is moved down from the identified to the in progress. And I can see, as I scroll across here, I can see all of the updates I've made to the fields. I might then need to go back and set another follow-up task to take whatever is the next step in my action plan. One thing that I like to do, some of you may already be doing this, if you have multiple people on your team who might be involved in this, who might be responsible, I like to remind us that we can assign our tasks to ourselves or to other users on the system. So if I need a teammate to follow up, I might assign this to Dwayne instead of to myself if it's appropriate for Dwayne to follow up. So to rehash that, once we have our prospect list, we use a combination of notes and tasks to track the progress as we go through until its successful resolution. And again, I don't want anyone to get too hung up on the specific custom fields that I used or the volume of custom fields that I use, because it'll be appropriate for each of you to look at your own strategy and your own constituency and define the process that works best for you. And that is going to be something, if you have an advisor, then that will be a good brainstorming session for you. Also, a word to the wise on adding custom fields in general, whether it's on the constituent screen or on the note screen, is before you push save, I would recommend always checking with customer support just to bounce your idea off of them to make sure that you're adding the field in the appropriate spot and you're using the most appropriate data type to make sure you can get the most reports, the best reports from the data that you put in there. they have unlimited patience for little piddly questions like that. So don't hesitate to reach out in a chat, tell them what you're doing, and get their okay before you go ahead and click the save button. Because once you add a new field and you put data in it, as many of you know, it's difficult or impossible to get that out of there. So that concludes the second half of the second of two halves. So we started with prospect identification through tags, triggers, and giving history and volunteer history. And then having identified the prospects, we charted a somewhat convoluted but a customized plan of attack to track all of those prospects through the process of asking, through the resolution of accepting or declining. So, Diana, how are we doing here?
Hi, Chris. That was awesome. I feel like time flew by. There was also a lot of great questions. We have one question here. Should someone's plan giving status change? Let's say they were marked as identified, but you then get confirmation that they will make a plan gift. Do you recommend updating the original note, or do you recommend creating a new note with the new information?
I would do everything on the same note. So do I have one open here? So here's the note. If I decide to fast forward right to the end of the process, I will change her status to accepted, or whatever her new status is, or I can update her readiness to a 9 out of 10. And maybe I want to move my close date up a little bit. But whatever you do, if it's the same ask, you should be using one note and update that same note as you go through.
Wonderful. And this is similar for when a prospect is identified as well, correct?
Yes. If you create multiple notes, you'll never be able to put them together and really see what's happening. So even though a note is a timeline item, so it seems it's a little non-intuitive to use a timeline item to track an asking process. But if you're consistent and you can refer back to that same note, no matter what happens with that constituent, then you'll always have it all in one place, and it will always show up correctly in your report.
Absolutely. If you can go back to your constituent custom fields, under your planned gift engagement tags and triggers, you do have something there if a constituent has already said yes to a planned gift.
Oh, yes. So that's, I kind of blew past that. But yes, if they've already said yes and you don't want to bother them again, that is a great tag to have, so you can exclude anybody who's already said yes for the purpose of asking. Great point. Yeah, I did kind of blow right past that.
Yes. We also had a comment earlier as well of them already having someone who they're not actively cultivating for a gift, but has already said that they would be or are in the will. So this would be a good way to mark that.
Exactly. Those are people you want to stay in close touch with and make sure that you always have a great relationship with them for their entire lifetime.
Absolutely. I mean, if they've already told you without having asked, that's wonderful.
In fact, your plan gift advisor may recommend additional steps that you might want to apply as post-asking steps, just to make sure that you're touching base at the appropriate intervals to maintain your relationship and make sure your status hasn't changed in their estate plans.
Oh, wonderful. Absolutely. And you'll notice Chris and I have talked a lot about your plan giving consultant, because really this is a personalized plan for your organization. So you want to make sure that you have that plan and you have a strategy in place. And I love that too. It doesn't end with the donor telling you that they're going to put you in the will, or they've already put you in the will. You still need to keep that relationship going. Can you quickly review again how to add these custom fields to a report?
Yes. To the note report?
Great question. So these are constituent custom fields that we're looking at. So these are the triggers and tags. So these constituent custom fields.
Okay, so so let's look at the report that we were working on. We started with that consecutive years or loyal donor template. So it gives me the donor history right away. And so I added that as a filter. So I didn't add that as, I actually didn't add any fields beyond the template fields, but that's a great question because you might want to know if they have tags or triggers, what are they? So if I wanted that to show up in the report, I would simply add that field and planned engagement tags and triggers. And I would add that. And then any tag or trigger that applied to that constituent. And since that was a multi-select text field, I might have multiple tags or triggers showing up in any constituents report.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Chris, first of all, for all of that wonderful information. And thank you, everyone, for all the great questions, too. I always love it when we get a lot of questions because we learn from everybody as well. And it's really nice to see that you're thinking about how this could work for your organization. We wanted to share some resources with everyone as well. We know an hour is not really enough time to talk about all the nuances of planned giving and tracking all of that, but we have some resources for you. We have here the State of Nonprofit Bequest Marketing. These are the studies that we talked about earlier that showed how much planned giving brings in or legacy giving brings in. We also have a list here of our nonprofit planned giving consultants. If you have a plan in place, that's great. If you need a little bit of extra help with your actual plan and strategy, we have a list of consultants that might be able to help you. We also have other resources here. We talked about volunteer tracking. If you are or aren't tracking volunteers yet in your database, we have a whole separate class on that you can take a look at. We used a lot of custom fields today, so you can take a look at that. And we started with the report template for loyal donors today. So this is a report template that's already in your database. Anyone can use this already. This already has the loyal donors, so these would be consecutive giving over the last 5 years, and you can add or subtract filters as needed. We also have, this is a brand new offering, the Bequest fundraising standard. So if you've attended the fundraising standard before, or if you haven't, all new Bloomerang customers get a seat to the fundraising standard. They have a new offering called the Bequest fundraising standard. This was also developed by Dr. Adrian Sargent, and it's 20 hours of self-paced online training over 4 weeks. So if you've attended the fundraising standard, that was 40 hours. The Bequest fundraising standard is 20 hours. So it includes readings, case studies, discussion forums, and of course there's a final exam at the end. And if you get 50% or more, you will receive a certificate of completion. I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll as well. If you would like a member of our team to reach out with more information about the Bequest fundraising standard, let us know, and we'll have a member of our team reach out. In the meantime, I'm going to check the chat again to see if we have any other last-minute questions come in. None at the moment. If you have additional questions that you might think about later as you're setting this up in the database, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can, of course, ask help from our fabulous support team. You can access that directly from your database. Click on the question mark icon on the top right. That will take you to all of our help and videos. You can also email support from here or initiate a live chat online. And I promise you're going to get a real person right away. And all of the notes will be emailed as well. So you'll receive an email with a link to the recording and the notes as to how Chris set up his custom fields in his database. And Chris, who is our lovely visitor over here?
He's my speaking coach and Toastmaster coach. That's Bogey. Bogey,
Hi,
the wonder
Bogey.
dog.
Awesome. And that's all we have for today. Bogey's getting a lot of compliments, Chris.
Thanks, Anne Marie, for the love. Love that. Bogey appreciates your love there. Okay,
Absolutely.
thanks. And it's really flattering to be invited to do a class that actually has CFRE credit. So I'm honored that Diana asked me to do this today. So thanks for that.
Chris is such a wealth of knowledge. So I'm always happy to have him with us in Academy. Thank you again, Chris. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.
See ya.